Have you ever thought about someone you lost and asked yourself, where are they right now? Not in the sense of heaven or hell, in the sense of right now, this second, what they're experiencing, whether they remember you, whether they know you're thinking about them, and whether there's anything you can do for them from where you are. Most people live with that question for years and never get an answer. Today, you're going to get one. Not from religion, from thousands of people who were there and came back and described the same place with details so specific that coincidence cannot explain it. Stop. Don't turn this off. Because the last section of this video, about whether you can right now influence where the person you lost is worth staying for until the end. Forget everything religion told you about purgatory, fire, torment, purification through suffering. That is not what people who are there describe, not even close. They describe three completely different states, three levels that are neither heaven nor hell, that exist between, and each one is specific, personal, and directly connected to how the person lived. The first state, those who saw everything. A woman, 62 years old, cardiac arrest, 23 minutes of clinical death. When she came back, she didn't talk about light and peace. She said to her daughter, "I saw everything I did wrong, not everything I did, only what caused pain to others. And there was a lot of it, more than I thought." She named specific people, specific situations. Some of them had happened 40 years ago. Things she had considered long forgotten. She said, "Nothing is forgotten there. Everything is stored. And you go through each one, not quickly, for as long as it takes to genuinely understand, not formally pass through, genuinely understand." The doctor recording her testimony cross-referenced some of the details with other family members. The details matched. This was not a hallucination of a dying brain. This was information she could not have had. Casey described exactly this. He said, "The first thing that happens to a soul after death, it sees its entire life, every second, every word, every decision, not as an observer, as every participant simultaneously. Everyone you hurt, you feel their pain, as your own. Everyone you helped, you feel their joy. And for some souls, those whose lives were densely packed with unfinished situations, this process takes a very long time, subjectively, because each situation requires genuine understanding, not formal processing, genuine. And until that happens, the soul remains in this state. This is the first level of what people called purgatory. Not fire, not punishment, honesty, complete, without the possibility of lying even to yourself. The second state, those who kept working. And here, a detail that changes everything you thought you knew about death. Some people who experienced clinical death described a space in which they continued to influence what remained unfinished in their physical lives, through the living, through dreams, through those sudden thoughts that arrive and feel like your own, but aren't. A documented case from the University of Virginia archives, a man who died without reconciling with his adult son, 15 years of conflict. 3 weeks after his death, the son began having dreams, not ordinary grief dreams, specific ones, in which the father said specific things, named details the son could not have known, about what the father had thought during the years they weren't speaking. The son wrote the dreams down, checked the details with other family members. They matched. The psychologist working with the son wrote in his report, "I cannot explain the source of this information, but I cannot deny that it was accurate." Casey said, "A soul in the intermediate state continues to work with what is unfinished through available channels. Dreams are the most direct of them. And this continues until the unfinished is resolved, or until the soul accepts that some things cannot be closed in this incarnation. The third state, those who chose. And this is the most unexpected of all three. People describe a moment, sometimes very clear, sometimes blurred, when they understand they have a choice, return or stay. And what's striking, there is no pressure, no coercion, nobody pulling them back and nobody beckoning them to stay. It truly is a choice, and what determines it is not the degree of sinfulness or righteousness, but whether there is unfinished business that the soul itself considers important to resolve. A woman from Dr. Kenneth Ring's research said, "I saw my daughter. She was 8 years old, and I understood I couldn't leave her now, not because I was told to come back, because I myself wasn't ready to leave that unresolved connection, and I chose to return, voluntarily." Another woman from the same research chose to stay. She saw her children, felt their presence, but she knew they would manage, because the unfinished business between them had already been closed during her lifetime. Casey said, "What determines the transition forward is not an external judge. It is the degree of internal readiness, the degree of completion of what needed to be completed." Now, what Casey said about time. A detail I've never heard stated this specifically anywhere else. Subjective time in the intermediate state does not correspond to physical time on earth. What for the living is a week, for a soul in this state may feel like years, and vice versa. This means the following. We cannot know, looking at how much physical time has passed since someone's death, what stage their soul is at. Someone who died yesterday may have subjectively already worked through an enormous amount of inner processing. Someone who died 10 years ago may still be in the state of working through one specific unresolved situation. Physical time is not the indicator. And now, the part worth staying for. Can the living influence what happens to those in the intermediate state? Casey answered this question directly. This is not consolation for the grieving. It is a specific mechanism. First, prayer, conscious, directed, emotionally charged. According to Casey, this is a literal energetic transmission that reaches the person it is directed toward. Not a metaphor, a signal that crosses the boundary. Second, forgiveness. Spoken aloud or internally, it closes an energetic debt between two souls. If you forgive someone who caused you pain, this removes part of the unfinished that is holding their soul in the intermediate state. Not because you're being virtuous, because forgiveness is the closing of a contract. Casey said, every time a living person genuinely forgives someone who has died, it lightens the state of that soul, regardless of whether the living person knows about this mechanism. Third, conversation. Words directed to someone who has died, spoken aloud with real intention, reach them. Not always, not in every moment, but they reach them. A woman lost her mother, with whom she had a difficult relationship. For years, she carried resentment she never expressed. After her mother's death, she began talking to her out loud, every day. She said everything she hadn't said in life, the anger, the pain, the incomprehension, and gradually, forgiveness. After several months, the dreams changed. Not anxious like before, nor calm. Her mother in them looked different, lighter, as if something had been resolved. The psychologist working with this woman wrote, "The change in the dreams was radical and happened specifically after she began these conversations." Casey would have called this the closing of unfinished business on both sides simultaneously. She was releasing, and that was allowing her mother to move. The most important practical conclusion: if the intermediate state is a process of completing what is unresolved, then the most important question you can ask yourself right now is not about death. It's about life. What in your relationships with the people you love remains unresolved right now? What hasn't been said? What hasn't been forgiven? What has been put off until later? Because every unresolved thing is what you'll take with you. What will hold you in the intermediate state? Or here, what you can close here, while you still have the ability to speak out loud, while you can still hear an answer, while you can still embrace someone, rather than working through it via dreams and signs from the other side of the boundary. One final question: is there a person, living or already gone, with whom you have something unresolved? Write it in the comments, because sometimes saying it out loud is the first step toward closing it. The very step that Casey described as the beginning of liberation, for both sides.